Hey everyone, this is Happy Wheels Cars and Stuff, and today we're going to be installing the ST Suspensions XTA Coilovers into my Fiesta ST. Please enjoy. The tools we need for this install will be a 10mm wrench, 13mm wrench, a 15mm wrench, 10mm socket, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 5mm Allen or T30 Torx, small flat tip screwdriver, at least a 6-inch extension, torque wrench, I highly recommend, breaker bar, ratchet wrench, a supplied spanner wrench, an impact gun, optional but definitely recommended, a drill, drill bits and lubricating oil, towels, brake cleaner, a jack, and of course, jack stands. First, take your breaker bar and break the lug nuts loose in your wheels. After that's done, jack up the car and place it on stands as shown. Be sure to use the indicated jack and stand points that are under the car. Now take the lug nuts off of the wheels and remove the wheels themselves. Inside the wheel well, you're going to need to remove the 10mm bolt for the brake line, this box, if you want to, the end link nut, the two nuts and bolts for the knuckle, and the ABS cable tab. At the top of the strut tower, you'll be removing the 10mm nuts on the brake reservoir, setting it to the side as shown, and then the top 3 strut nuts. Start by removing the knuckle nuts using an 18mm and a 15mm socket or wrench. Keep the bolts in place for now. Then, remove the end link nut using a 15mm boxed end wrench and a 5mm Allen bit or a T30 Torx bit, as shown. After the nut is removed, move the end link away from the strut. Next, remove the 10mm nut for the brake line, as well as the rubber tab right here. After that, remove the 2 lower bolts. You may have to manipulate the knuckle a little bit to remove them. Now, remove the 3 13mm nuts on top of the strut tower. Make sure you leave at least one nut threaded slightly to keep the strut from falling out on you. Now, while holding onto the strut with one hand, fully remove the final top nut and lower the strut. With the strut unattached, take a small flat tip screwdriver or something similar to pry out the ABS cable tab as shown. After the tab is removed, move it out of the way and fully remove the strut from the wheel well. Now it's time to install the new coilover. Be sure to start the process by tightening the 3 top mount nuts as tight as possible before moving on. Once you're tight enough, line up the steering knuckle inside the lower part of the coilover, attach both lower bolts and nuts, and torque it down to 60 foot-pounds. After torquing the bolts, put the ABS cable tabs into the slots as shown. Then tighten the 10mm brake line bracket fully. Be sure to insert the end link into its slot and tighten down the nut using the same method as we did to remove it. Now verify that everything is tight in the wheel well and then fully tighten the 3 top mount nuts using a 13mm wrench. After that's done, reattach the brake fluid reservoir and the driver's side coilover is finished. The process is going to be the same for the passenger side, but without the fluid reservoir. Here's the size difference between the ST suspension coilovers and the stock struts. Now with the rear of the car on stands, use the jack to slightly lift the frame where the shock meets. This is to relieve the tension when removing the bolt. Now, using a 15mm socket, remove the lower shock bolt. Once the bolt is taken out, lower the jack. Next, using a 10mm socket and extension, remove the 2 top mount bolts. Then remove the shock from the vehicle. Once the shock is out, take out the spring and the foam padding from the top of the tower. Then remove the top mount by using a 10mm socket to remove the nut. Once the top mount is removed from the shock, you'll need to make the center hole of the top mount larger. You'll need to use up to and including a 25/64 inch drill bit to make the hole large enough for the new shock. And please be sure to use lubricating oil and proper protective equipment when drilling the holes. Once the holes are drilled, clean the top mounts. When you install the top mount onto the new shocks, using an impact is a quick way to tighten the nut. Don't use too much torque on it though, just enough to tighten it down. Now clean the top and bottom mounting bases before moving forward. For the plastic piece on the bottom spring base, the arrow needs to point towards the front of the car with the mount upwards. You also need to line up the tab with the small bottom hole when snapping it into place. The adjustable spring top mount will be installed as shown, with the flat end of the spring facing upwards. When you're installing the spring, make sure the bottom part of the spring wraps around the plastic hook. Also, adjust the top mount enough to where the spring will not fall out of place when you let it go. Now, install the new shock using the 10mm socket and extension. Be sure to tighten these down as much as you can, either with a ratchet or an impact. If they aren't tight enough, there will be an annoying and possibly damaging rattle when driving along. After the top mount is tightened down, align the bottom of the shock with the lower mounting point. After aligning the shock, insert and fully tighten the lower bolt. I recommend tightening with an impact, otherwise you should torque the bolt down to 84 foot-pounds. Make sure that the height on both sides are even before finishing up. After you've done this, check that nothing is loose and then start putting the wheels back on. After the wheels and lug nuts are in place, raise the car off of the stands and lower the rest of the way. Now torque the lug nuts down to at least 100 foot-pounds using the star pattern, and then you're good to go. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Leave your comments in the comment section below. If you want to watch one of my other videos, click on the link in the top left, or if you want to watch the pre-installation video of these coilovers, top right. Have a good one.